Hello everyone, welcome to our new tutorial, and this month we are doing February's birth flower, which happens to be this lovely bearded iris. We could have had primroses, but I love this iris. I think it's just gorgeous and not as difficult as it looks. So this is what we're doing today, and I have got my usual setup. I've got my palette, I've got my paints here, I've got my water, my clean water, and I've got a cloth here. And today for the brushes, I am going to be using a large. This is a number 10, and this is because I want to put just a little bit of a wash behind the flower. I don't want it to be on a stark white page. I just think it will look nicer. So we're going to be doing that. And I have a number 8, I believe that is. And I have a very small number 2 for some of the details. And for some of the smaller details, I've got my trusty spotter. So that's what we've got today. Like I said, we're going to be doing a wash. It's also going to be quite a bit of colour mixing because I didn't want to just use the bog standard paints. I'm using my Winsor & Newton professional paints, but I do want to do a little bit of colour mixing today. So I thought that might be quite nice to learn a bit of that. So without further ado, let's get started. Like I said, I do want to put a bit of a wash on the back of this. Now, I only want to put a little bit in places. I don't want to cover the whole page, just to give the flower a little bit of a background, against, because parts of it are quite light. Obviously, there's quite a lot of purples in there, and this lovely green stem. It's got some tiny little, it's almost like papery straw parts on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet the page, ready for the wash. But I'm going to do it in sections, and because, like I said, I don't want to cover the whole page. I just want a nice little kind of backdrop for it, as it were. Before we do this, obviously, I've got to mix up some colours. So I think for this backdrop, I wanted a kind of orangey hue. So I think I'm going to go with burnt sienna because it is one of my favourite colours, and I just think it will look nice. It's only going to be very, very light, but I do think it'll look nice against this iris. So I'm going to come and mix up a really watery burnt sienna. I'm just going to drop this onto a wet wash, and hopefully it will give us a nice little backdrop. So, taking my large number 10 brush, I'm going to start in this corner here. And I'm going to put my glasses on so I can actually see what I'm doing. There we go. And I'm just going to wet right up to the edge of the flower and the stem. And I'm going to wet this section of the paper. Now you want this quite wet. I am using 100% cotton paper. Don't worry if you haven't got 100% cotton paper, but you do want this to be quite wet. We don't want it dripping, but we do want it to give us a nice spread, as it were. So I'm going to come right down to all the little details of the stem, just about there. Make sure that's all nice and wet. And I'm just going to go that far. I'm not going to go any further. So this bottom quarter of the paper, make sure it's nice and wet close up. There we go. I think that's wet enough. You should have a nice sheen on the paper, a nice glossy sheen. And now I'm just going to pick up some of that burnt umber, and I'm just going to drop that almost around the edge of the plant, flower, should I say. And it will move, as you do that, it will move on its own, and it will give a nice effect. If you find it's not moving far enough, you can go in and give it a bit of encouragement. And this will dry a lot lighter, of course, as watercolour does. But it will just give us, it's almost like a stain behind the flower. And that's it. That's as far as I really want to go with that. Right, we're going to do the same for this side of the page. Coming up as close as we can without going over the actual flower. I'm just wetting that all down. Again, you want a nice even wash of water here. And I'm just going to go possibly that far up there. I'm going to pick up some more of this burnt umber, and the same thing, I'm just going to drop it down the side of the flower. As close as you can go. And I'm just going to encourage it to come this way a little bit. And that's that. There is a little part in between the stems here, so we don't want to forget that. So we'll put that in as well there. And now again, picking up some of that wash, I'm going to drop some of that colour in there. It's almost going to be like spring sun is peeping through when it's dried. I'm hoping, anyway. And we're going to just repeat the process. I'm going to do this top part now. Coming up to where we finished off there. And we're meeting up on this side where we finished off. And we meet up with the other side here. So just go all the way around. You don't even have to do, if you don't want to put the background on this, you can just do the flower. It will be just as lovely. January's birth flower was those lovely carnations. And I just wish, I might actually add a background to that. Maybe I'll do a video how to make a quick background. It just looked a little bit lost on the page, you know. So, taking some more of this colour, and I'm just going to come around the edge like this, dropping that burnt sienna, watery, very watery burnt sienna onto the background there, and around this side. Be careful not to go on the flower. I mean, it's not the end of the world if you do. There are ways to lift that, but try to be careful as you go around. I don't want to take it too far out, so I'm going to rinse off my brush. And I'm just going to encourage it to kind of spread as far as it wants to go. And I'm going to leave it at that. And that, of course, will dry much, much lighter. Just do go around and make sure that you're up as far as you can go, because any little gaps, once we put the purples on, are going to really, really show. soften that up a little bit. If there's any parts you need to soften, just go around with some clear water and it will encourage it to follow wherever you've put the water. So I think I'm happy with that. Now obviously we're going to need to leave that to dry before we get the full effect and before we can get any of this part done. But that is the first step finished. And that was really, really nice, simple way to add a little backdrop to this flower. So I'm going to dry off my brush. I'm going to leave this to dry and I'm going to come back. Now we do need to make sure it's very, very dry. So this is the time to go and make a cuppa of a biscuit or two and this will be nice and dry. Now, as you can see, when we put the wet wash on, we've got a little bit of buckling going on. Now I'm using a paper block, so I'm not at all concerned about that buckling. It simply means that my paper is glued on all four sides in a pad. And I love blocks for that reason. If you don't have a block, you will need to tape your paper down onto your surface. I should really do a video about stretching watercolour paper. I'll make note of that in my diary to do that for you. But you do, because we're putting quite a wet wash on, you do need to tape around to stop the buckling. Having said that, if it does buckle, there are ways to fix it once the painting is finished. So don't despair. Nothing's unfixable. So I'll come back in a little while when this is dried and we'll begin with the stem and the little buds and straw-like pieces, and then we'll move on to the actual stem, and finally we'll do the flower. It looks a really intricate flower. There are a couple of parts on there, but nothing unachievable. So I will see you all again in a moment. I am back. And before we go any further, what I want to do is I'm going to use my kneadable eraser and I am just going to lighten up some of these lines. Now I'm not going to remove them completely, obviously, and I'm not going to lighten them up too much because most of these are going to be under paint anyway. Sometimes it's better with a kneadable eraser if you roll it into like a sausage and just, if you haven't got a kneadable eraser, just use an ordinary one and just roll over. It seems to pick up a lot more that way. And that is enough for me. That's as far as I want to go. Like I said, I'm not going to lighten this too much because that's going to be covered anyway. And we've got quite a dark purple going on there. So I think I'm going to leave that as it is. And we are now going to get into some colour mixing. So for this stem and these, I'm going to call them buds. I think this is a bud. This is obviously where the flower has come out from. But we do need to mix up some colours for this. And the first colour we need is lemon yellow, or Windsor lemon is what I'm going to use. I only need a tiny bit of that, so that will be fine for that. I'm also going to mix up some Windsor blue with some yellow ochre. And that will give us a lovely green. There's a little bit more yellow ochre in there, I think. That's better. That will give us a lovely green. If you haven't got these colours, just use what you've got. I could have used olive green. I just wanted to mix it and show you how easy, if you haven't got olive green in your mix of paints, you can make some with a blue. And I prefer the yellow ochre because it gives an olive green. A yellow ochre we're going to need on its own as well. So I'm going to just add a touch of that up there. So we've got yellow ochre, Windsor lemon, and a mix of Windsor blue and yellow ochre. We're also going to need a darker green, and for that I'm going to use Hooker's green and some burnt umber. And that's going to give us a nice shadow green. And we want it just a bit darker than this green. Just putting a little bit of yellow ochre in there. So we've got an olivey colour there, and we've got a darker green there. And that should be fine to get us started. So I'm going to start with my number 8. And I'm going to begin. I'm going to wet my brush. And I'm just going to pick up this Windsor lemon. I'm going to add that all over this little bud we've got here. Right the way down to the part that comes onto the stem. Okay. And then while that is damp, I'm going to rinse off my brush. I'm just going to dry my brush a little bit because I don't want to add too much water. I'm going to take some of this olivey colour that we've got, and I'm going to add some to the bottom of this bud. And I'm going to take it up the side there, not right to the top. So just about there, like that. And I'll rinse out again. I'm going to pick up a little bit of this straw colour, and just on the top of this bud there is like it almost looks like a little hook. It's just the end of the bud, and I'm going to take that down into the yellow, or the lemon should I say, and we're just going to touch that in there. I'm also going to put a tiny bit on this little side here. And that is our first part of that done. We're going to let that dry, but while that's drying we are going to come up to the part that is under here, and I'm going to take some more of that lovely lemon. I'm going to take that right down to the base of the bud there, and right the way up to the top part, which then joins the flower. So it's the whole entire bud there, like that. And then while that's wet, I'm going to take some of this lovely olive green. I'm going to drop that in on top. Again, I'm going to come up the sides, and I'm going to come up, there's like a little triangle section at the top there. I'm going to put green on there as well, and just a tiny touch down that little side there. Then we're going to pick up some of the darker green, and just around the edge I'm going to touch in with the darker green. And that will give us a nice bleed out into the lighter green. I'm coming back up with the darker green, and I'm going to touch some of that on that little section at the top there, and also just in there. I'm going to rinse my brush out, and before everything dries I'm going to take some of that straw, that yellow ochre straw colour, and I'm going to touch that in just along the top edge where that papery kind of transition is going on there. go. Just touching back in with that dark green. And then I'm going to take some more of that dark green. I'm going to go back to the bud that we started with. I'm just going to add some of that dark green on the lower part of that bud. I'm going to rinse out. I'm going to take out the excess water and I'm just going to soften the edge of that dark green so we haven't got a harsh line there. There we go. So we've got the straw colour, we've got the lemon yellow in the centre, we've got the olive green, and we've got the darker colour there on the triangle, and just down the sides, touched in with some of that darker green. Put a little bit more green on this bottom edge here. There we go. We're going to leave that to dry, or you can dry it with a hairdryer, which is what I'm going to do. Just clean my brush off. And then we will come back and we will work on the stem and the leaf. Okay, mine is nice and dry. I'm just going to make sure we've got enough of this green for our leaves. So we want hooker's green. Just going to mix up a little bit more so we don't run out. And a small amount of burnt umber. And that will just neutralise that that green a little touch, so it's not quite as vibrant, because this isn't a very vibrant green on here. It's quite dark. That should be perfect. Okay. And now I'm going to come in with my number 8, and we're going to use the wet and dry technique just to fill in this stem here and this leaf here. We're going to do that first, okay? So damp down my brush, take some of this lovely green, and very carefully just going to paint that lovely stem in there. And that comes right up to this little bud there. And right up to this bottom of this flower bud there. So that's that part done. And same thing with this leaf here. And we will come back over and put a little bit of detail on these afterwards, so they're not just a plain green. There we go. And now for this big leaf coming behind here. Now we've got to be careful here because we've got this little detail that we put in, so do bear that in mind when you're coming around there with the leaf. Don't make it too wet, don't go in too far over that, but it should be quite easy. So let's just load up my brush and do our best to get round there. It's going to be a little bit fiddly, but you can do it. Remember to put your glasses on if you use glasses. I'm forever forgetting to put mine on, and then I'm like, why can't I see? Okay, so really take your time, just go around that little tiny detail that we put in there, and it goes kind of behind the petal of the flower there, so just take it up to where it goes there, and then oops, down the side. There we go. Like that. And I'm going to give that a dry off with the hairdryer because I just want to come in after this is dry and put exactly the same colour back on the top, just down here and under the edge of this bud. So I'm just going to dry this off quickly. Okay, and I'm just going to take the same colour and just, it's really hard to see on the picture, but just down there is a slight shadow where this leaf is obviously connected, and just underneath there there's just that little tiny difference in colour on that lower edge there. So I'm just trying to soften that in there, and here where this kind of connects there, it's a tiny touch darker there, and just behind there. So this is exactly the same colour, and then we've almost got a dry brush now. I'm just going to put in a little detail on the little leaf, just a little vein going down the centre of the leaf. Now this picture is so dark I can't actually see if that is what is going on there, but that's what I'm doing, and that's the great thing about art, isn't it? You can do what you want. So I've almost got it's almost a dry brush I've got here. I'm just touching in a little tiny bit of dark just up the middle of that leaf. And there are no markings on the actual stem, so I'm going to call that done, I do believe, for the stem, so we can get on to the fun part of painting the flower. Just touching in a tiny bit more of that dark green. And while I've got it on my brush, I'm going to put those veins in. And I'm hardly touching the paper, and I've got a really dry brush. So I'm just putting some markings in there. And I can't see any on this one, but I will presume that there are some. And I'm just using, you can probably hear it. It's really, really dry. And that gives us a nice effect on this papery part of our flower. So I'm going to rinse off my brush and dry it off. And the next thing we are going to do is we are going to need to mix up a very, very pale grey. And that is because this flower, though it looks white, it's not actually white. It's got some really nice shadow on it. And the petals themselves are white, but I want to put a shadow in areas to show the curve and the shape of the leaves. So we need a grey for that. Okay, so the easiest way to do a lovely light grey wash, I will show you which colours I'm going to use, and you may be surprised. I'm going to take some cadmium red. This is actually cadmium free red. Okay, and I'm going to take this lovely cerulean blue that I've got, and I'm going to mix the two, and that should give us lovely. I think I'm in my own light there. You can't even see that, can you? Let me move that up a little bit. See that lovely grey? So I'll do it again because you didn't see. Okay. Cadmium red, and I like to use cerulean blue. And one just will neutralise the other. Need some more blue. And it will give us a lovely grey. Now this is looking too blue. Touch more red. This will give us a lovely grey colour. There we go. That's better. You see that? That is a lovely grey to use on these petals, and we're going to use such a watery, barely there amount that you're really only going to see it because I've told you it's there, you know. Go and get yourself another cuppa while you wait for this to dry, and we will come back and we will begin working on the lower two petals with some shadow. We've got a little bit of shadow on this top one, and we've got some behind this back one, not too much on this front one at all. So a cuppa, come back and we'll get on with that. Okay, I am back, and it's actually quite a little bit later because I had some other things that I had to get on with. So this is lovely and dry now. Now I have taken my kneadable eraser and I've just lightened up. There were some lines here and here, and I've just lightened those up a little bit because they absolutely would show through the grey that we're going to put on there. I cleaned off my palette because we were running out of space, but I have mixed up a tiny little bit of that grey colour, that light grey. Might have to make a little bit more, but also going to make up the violet colour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in to my permanent magenta. Now, if you've got a purple that you like, please just use that. I'm just mixing up some colour here. So I've got some permanent magenta, And to that I'm going to add a touch of French ultramarine because I want to darken that down. So I've got this lovely purple. That's going to be perfect for the first part of this lovely petal. So to begin this, I'm going to take some plain water. I'm going to start on this petal here, this little curled up petal. I'm just going to wet the whole surface of the petal. Close to the edge as you can go. Follow the shape. It's a little bit fiddly. You can use a smaller brush if you need to. So that's nice and wet. And I'm going to take my number 2 brush. Just going to damp my brush down a touch. I'm going to pick up some of that grey. I'm going to touch that in on the very, very bottom edge. And it's going to dry a lot lighter, of course, but this is just a shadow that we have got on the bottom edge of this petal. I'll rinse out my brush. I'm going to pick up some of this lovely purple, and I'm just going to touch this in around the very edge, and it's going to bleed in to part of the petal there, but that's what we want. So I'm just going around the shape of the petal, just down to there, and we'll let the water that we've put on do its thing, and it will just pull it. If you need to encourage it, wet your brush and just encourage it to come down a touch. Okay, so we've got the grey there, and we've got the purple around the edge there. And that's all we're going to do on that one for now, because we need to let that dry. So now I'm going to take my number 8 brush again, and we're going to come over the other side, and we're going to dampen down this large petal here. I'm going to do the same thing all the way around the whole shape. Now this is a bearded iris, and this is the beard part. And it's got tiny little strands that we're going to put in, and tiny little yellow tops to the strands. This is probably the most fiddly part, to be honest, out of the whole thing, is this little bearded part of the flower. So we're not going to worry about that for now. We're going to dampen up the whole petal, and we're going to avoid this area here. Okay. I've actually got some purple on my brush there. Don't do that. Use clean water. Do what I say. Don't do what I do. I should have actually got some clean water then. So I've got a shade of purple on mine. It will, of course, dry lighter. I doubt very much if we'll see possibly a hint of that. And just follow the shape right the way around there, making sure there are no puddles. You need to go right to the edge, but we don't want any large puddles. Now, if you do end up with a puddle on any part of this, all you need to do is dry your brush off, then go back in and just lift where the puddle is, okay? So don't worry too much, but just try and mop the puddle up if you do end up with a puddle. Okay, so that's all lovely and damp. It's got a nice sheen on it. And I should put that brush there for a second. I'm going to pick up my smaller brush again, and I'm going to come back into the purple. And same thing, we're going to right the way around the edge of this petal, and we're going to let it bleed towards the inside edge a touch. So all the way around this edge here. Get some more, and this part is curled up, so we need to do the top edge of that part there, and this part is pretty much purple all over, so just go around the edge and it will take itself in there. And we are going to come and strengthen this up when we add our final details on. And start from this edge and I'm going to go all the way around, just dropping this lovely purple colour right the way around the edge. And this will follow anywhere you've put water. So if you've gone slightly outside of your petal, it will unfortunately follow the edge of that. So just go around, add in that tiny touch purple in till you're happy. Okay, and I'm going to come back to my grey colour. Definitely going to have to mix some more of this up. And just down the centre here, I'm going to add a little shadow to the inside of the petal. And I make sure I've got no hard edges on that, so I'm just with a clean damp brush softening the edges of that out slightly. Okay, now I'm going to pause and I'm going to go and change my water because I don't want to colour my petal. So I will be back in a second. Okay, I am back with some clean water. I have mixed up some more of that grey colour there because we didn't have quite enough. Right, I'm going to take my clean water and again I'm going to wet this leaf this time, the petals not leaf. Again, avoiding this beard in the middle there. So take that all the way around the edge. Right up close to that little beard. I'm going to make that all lovely and damp. Again, try not to make any puddles with it. Be very careful not to touch this purple edge that we've already put in there. It can be a bit fiddly, but use a smaller brush if you need to. Okay, just trying to make sure I've got all those little edges in there. Okay, like that. I'm going to take a touch of this shadow colour. And this time we're going to go the opposite way. So we're going to go this way. And we're going to go from here up towards the beard. I'm going to rinse off my brush. And I'm just going to soften the edges of that shadow so that this is not too obvious a line. I'm really hoping you can see. I'm not going to be able to see until I'm editing whether you can see this or not on here. I'm really hoping you can. And now coming back in with the smaller brush, I'm going to take our lovely purple colour. And same thing again, we're going to touch all around the edge. So I'm going to start from here. And I'm going to come and touch around the edge, following the shape of the petal. And if you feel like it's not moving, just get a damp brush and just soften the edge there, and it will follow the water. My paper is drying extremely fast because we have got our heating on because it's freezing at night and it is now night time. It's so cold at night, so we put the heating on. Unfortunately, it's making my paper dry rather quick. So I'm just going to dampen that down again. I'm actually going to dampen that edge again there. So, follow, that's better, around the edge, follow the shape all the way around this second petal. And while this is damp, just make sure that mine is still damp. Just under the beard, I'm just going to put in a few of those lines. Now they will move about because obviously the paper is wet, but we just want a kind of indication of where they're going to go. We are going to come back in and add more detail to those afterwards. And I'm also going to re-dampen just the centre part under the beard of this one, and I'm going to do the same thing. So just touching in really lightly down those little lines that are on the drawing. You should be able to see them. Everything's going to soften down. Then when we come in with our final details, you'll see it'll all crisp back up. Okay, I'm going to clean out my brushes because I'm in a bit of a pickle at the moment here. Don't know what I've used where. Very unorganised tonight. Okay, so that's our lower two edges done. Now we've got a little bit of shadow that's going to come up here on this top petal. And we've got a little bit of shadow that's going to come behind here on this one. And there's none on this facing petal. So, you know, it's in full light there. There's no shadow at all on that one. So, have I got enough? I think I've got enough of the shadow colour. Okay, so I am going to come back in. I'm going to use my slightly smaller brush first because I want to come back in on this petal behind here. Now this is actually part of this here, and so is this part here. So this is what we're going to dampen down with our water. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to take it right the way up there, following the edge of the petal, and along this side there, and this top one. Okay, I'm going to take my smaller brush, going to pick up some of the shadow colour first of all, and I'm going to drop it just in there, just behind the top edge of that petal there. It actually comes as far down as that edge there. And there is a tiny bit behind there. Okay, pick up some of the purple colour. And I'm going to start going around just like we did before, dropping the colour on the very, very edge of that petal. Follow it around. And around this edge there, you see it's kind of curled over there. And then around that top edge there. Now mine is not moving about quite as much as I want it to. So if you are having the same problem, I will show you how to fix that. So I'm dropping the colour in. I'm going to take a clean brush with just some water on, and I am just going to encourage that to come down by putting a little touch of water on the outside edge, and that will just encourage that to bleed and spread rather than having a harsh edge. So we want this layer to be quite soft before we come in with the details. Okay, I just think I need to mix up a touch more of this purple, so I'm going to take my permanent magenta, I think it was. Permanent magenta, which is a bright pink, and some ultramarine, French ultramarine, to give us the lovely dark purple colour. Okay, so where are we? We now want to do this petal that is behind here. So same thing again. Take some clean water, and I'm going to go right the way over the whole of that back petal. And it comes down there. Again, mind the little beard. Just be very wary that you've not bled onto the little beard. And it comes around this piece here. I'll try and keep mine damp this time. It's drying so fast. I'm going to take my smaller brush. Now I'm going to come into the purple. And I'm just going to touch in again around that edge, all the way down to there, trying to follow the shape. And again, anywhere that you're not seeing the colour move, just come in with a damp brush and just add a tiny amount of water, and it will begin to bleed into the water. And soften up the edge. Okay, we're almost there. We have got our centre petal left, and we've got a couple of bits. Actually, I'm going to do this now. Take some of this purple, and just on the edge, there's a small shape there, and it is all entirely purple. So I'm just going to put that in now. It's almost like a little crescent shape. And over on this edge here. So this shape that is tucked just behind this petal here is entirely purple. At least the base layer is purple. Okay, so you can put those in. I'm going to take some more of that, and just under this petal edge, right where that straw colour that we put in is, that is got a deep purple colour as well. So we're going to put an underlayer of this colour in. And the same on this side. Okay, and I think that is it for those shapes. And we have got one petal left to do. Now actually I can see, I'm going to take some water, and this shape behind here I'm going to dampen down right next to where we've just put that little purple shape in. Now I just want to get this in before we leave this to dry, because it'll all dry at the same time then. Okay, so I'm going to take a mix of the purple again, and we are going to come around this edge here like this, and it will spread this way. Not quite up to this edge. You want a tiny kind of slither of light behind there. So down there, around the edge, and just let that bleed as it's going. Now, I'm going to rinse all my brushes off, and I'm going to allow this to dry. I will get the hairdryer out and get mine nice and dry. You can have a cup of tea. We're having lots of cups of tea today. Don't have too many biscuits though, we're going to end up with a waistline like mine. And I'm going to come back and we're going to do the final petal, and then we're going to get intricate with all the little lines and things that's going to bring this flower to life. So I'll be back shortly. Okay, we're lovely and dry. So we've got our final petal to do, and this one, there's no shadow as such on here, because we're going to, there kind of is, but we're going to add that in with the purple. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our clear water, we're going to wet the whole thing. Now, I might have some trouble here because, like I said, I've got my heating on. It is night time and my paper is drying ever so fast. So I'm going to keep an eye on it. I might have to wet mine down a few times, but this is what we're going to do. We're going to go right the way around the edge, and make sure before you do it that you can just see where the edge is, because there are a couple of little folds and things in here and at the base, and there's a fold there as well. Okay. I'm also at quite a strange angle tonight because I couldn't get the light quite right, so hence the awful reflection on my palette there. And I do this as quick as I can while also trying to keep the shape of this lovely petal. I'm not too worried because, I mean, like I did before, we can encourage it to go where we want it to go, but I'd rather it just did what it was told the first time. And we're going to go right down the stem there, avoiding these two little side pieces. So over that side, like that, and around, avoiding that little folded edge. Around there, across there, down this edge. We're going to go over this folded edge, down to there, and then over and down the stem. So I think mine is okay. And now I'm going to get my smaller brush, come into the purple. I'm going to start on this folded edge, I think, or just below the folded edge. So we're going to go right the way around there, down to there. And then around the folded edge, up this side. And at the top, it's quite difficult to see where this is going up the top here. It kind of goes up there like that. Then down this edge. I think this edge has already dried on me. And around that fold. And up and around like that. Now mine is definitely dried, so I will be tackling that in a moment. I just want to get the colour on. Where it's meant to be. Around that fold there. And then I'm going to take my number 8. I'm going to get some water, and I'm just going to encourage this line to bleed out where I need it to go. So I'm just adding some more water just in front of the line. That's better. Tiny bit more of this purple. Lost my curled edge there. Try and put that back in. This stem is quite dark, so we can fill that in completely. So the whole of that bottom stem there, like I said. And then up the centre, where this line is on the artwork, while it's damp, it doesn't have to be wet, just damp, we're going to put the line in that's thicker at the bottom, and then it goes up into a single line, kind of fades out at the top there. So get that in while it's damp. I hope you can see that. I've zoomed in a little bit. And the next thing we're going to do is mix up some more purple, but this time it's going to be darker, and we're going to add in some of the intricate details on the petals. I'm just adding a touch more purple to this lower petal here. And then of course we have got the little beards to do. Actually, I might do those next because then they'll have a chance to dry for us. It just wasn't looking as purple. It's possible I mixed up slightly darker mix when I did that one. Try and encourage that to spread out a little bit. That's better. Much happier with that now. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to mix up a much darker version. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing Purple Lake. And to that I'm going to add some violet. And to that I'm going to add some Prussian blue. Now I like Prussian blue, it's one of my favourite blues. But it will just give us that lovely dark version of this purple. Now this is of a milk, I would say, consistency, possibly a thin cream. So that's the sort of consistency you want. Okay. Now for our final details, we do need everything to be dry. So I think I'm going to start on this lower petal here, because I really do need that to be dry. We need to get the beards in as well, so mix up a tiny little bit of this grey colour that we had. You can barely see that. There we go. And where these beards are, I'm very carefully going to add in some almost stripes. They're not almost stripes, they are stripes, but they're really, really close together. And I'm doing some in one direction, some in another direction, because obviously there's not just a row of these. They are going off in different directions. So go one way and then go the other way with just a series of these little lines. Okay, and then I'm going to take a touch of Windsor lemon. To that, I'm going to add a tiny touch of New Gamboge, and that will darken that down a little bit. You don't want this too thin. And then I'm just going to add some little spots almost onto the very top of those little lines that we've just put in. So what I tend to do is kind of go up and down on the top edge, and then I will do a few kind of randomly a little bit further down, just so it looks like there's a little bit of depth to them. Okay, and that is all there is to the little bearded parts. I might come back in with the grey and just go over in a few directions over the top, and that again will add to the depth and look like there are many layers, as of course there are. And now finally we need to do is get these details in. Now we can begin, actually, I am going to start on this petal, but before I do that I want to get this centre part in because it is quite dark, this central part here. So I'm going to take this very dark mix that we've got, and under here I'm going to make very, very dark in there. Same on the other side. Go right down to where the flower comes out of the bud there. I'm going to take some more of that dark and go over the little crescent that we put on there earlier, and also to the base of this one is also quite dark. So it's actually the bottom, and then it goes up one side of it there. And I'm also going to add a touch to the edge of this one. I'm going to rinse out my brush, and I'm just going to soften that edge like that, so there's a nice transition. Okay, we've got some more quite dark all the way around this little bottom edge of that part there. So I do the same thing. I'm going to rinse out my brush, and I'm just going to soften that so that it kind of bleeds nicely to that part there. And I come back into this yellow for a second, and I'm just going to touch this in right next to that really dark edge that we put in there. And I'm going to take some of the dark purple that I've now added yellow to. That was clever. And I'm going to touch along the edge of it. And that will kind of bleed into that yellow there, which is what we want. And I'm going to come up this inside edge of where this petal curves. Rinse off my brush again, take off the water and just soften that edge. And this edge. So I'm just adding a tiny dampness just to soften it so there's not a harsh line there. And now all we're left to do is to put on these tiny veins. Now, not only has it got veins, it's got tiny, tiny spots as well. So take whichever brush you are comfortable with. I am using a number 2, which isn't particularly tiny, but I do want to make sure that my brush is completely dry. And now I'm going to take some of this purple. I'm just going to roll it so that I get a nice point on my brush. And I'm going to begin putting these little lines in. Now, I did add these on the line art, but I mean, quite a few of them will have got lost in the water and bits and bobs that we've been doing. So all you need to do is really fine lines. And I'm barely touching the paper as I'm doing this. I'm just almost skimming the top. And you want to go right from the edge and just put in a series of, like, if you can still see your lines, all well and good, just follow those. If not, just put in some little random lines. And some of them, if you look, they almost look like little, like the letter Y. So they're not kind of one straight line. And we also want to follow the curve of the petal edge. So we don't want to go all that way. As this goes around the corner, we want to turn our lines so that it follows the edge of the petal. So we're just going to carry on doing this all the way around the edge of the petal. You can put more of these in, you can put less of these in. That is the beauty of nature. No two things in nature are alike. So if you found 2 bearded irises, they would not, they'd look similar, but they would not be perfectly alike. So just go around adding these lines in. And this is probably going to take a while, I'm not going to lie. It probably will, but this is the part I love because I love detail. Make some shorter, make some longer, make some little Y shapes. There's one there that's like a little Y shape. And then I'll put a little line between. And then the next one I do, I'll just do a line. So you just need to vary these little lines as you go around. And what you'll end up with, let's just finish this part here, is we'll have all the detail. I'm hoping you can see this. I'm trying to squint on my camera. And behind that, you'll have this shaded purple that we put in. And it'll all come together and it will just look fab once it's done. So I'm going to carry on. Now, here, we've got a little, it's not really curling up. It's almost like a little frill on the side there. So what I'm going to do is these little lines are going to come this way because they are going onto this frilly kind of edge here. Okay. And then where we put this really dark edge, there are lines there as well. Less obvious because it is so dark, but they are most definitely there. So going to add those in, and that will make that little dark area make sense. And now this is an edge that is frilling this way. So this is a curled edge. So I'm just going to add lines along this little frilled edge. And follow the shape of the little frill. And then once you've put the detail in, it's almost as if it gives it more of a shape. You can see that it's a little frilled kind of edge there. Okay, and I'm just going to carry on going around. Take your time, there's no rush. I may speed this part up now and then come back when I am back around to the final petal, because I'm sure you don't want to sit here for hours watching me doing that. So I'm just going to carry on, and once I get round to here, I'll speed the process up and continue around, and I'll slow down again when I get to the final petal. So enjoy the process. As you get to this edge here, these lines are going to go more into the centre, so more this way. So bear that in mind as you're going around. Just look at the picture and try and follow the shape of the petal. There's also some darker areas on the edge of this side of the petal, so you can touch those in as well with the darker purple. Also, before I forget, these lines that we put in, do you remember when it was damp? You can now really, really lightly, I'm barely touching the paper, and even if it's a broken line, that's good. And we're just going back over where we put those little kind of lines earlier, just adding in, and there's a few under the beard there as well. And also, don't forget, there are spots. So those can be added. Some areas are more spotty than others, and I think they tend to be spottier nearer the base of the petal. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to add most of the spots concentrated in this kind of area, and then they're going to get less, more spaced apart as it goes down the petal. Okay, same thing over here. They definitely seem to be more concentrated in this area, and then there are just a few kind of spaced out. If you don't think you've got enough lines, just go back and add a few more. Which is exactly what I'm doing, because there seems to be areas that have got less. There, so that's the first petal done. I hope you can see that. Should I lift it up? Let me lift it up so you can see. I'm hoping you can see that. That's the first one done. And now you can see why I wanted to speed up that process, because, like I said, I'm a stickler for detail, and I will just keep going and going and going, and it will take me quite a while, and this video will become so long. So I am now going to speed the process up, and I will see you around the other side. Okay, I am right back to the final petal now, and I've put most of the line work on there, and some of the final parts are to go up this middle stem. Now we've got a wider section at the bottom, and the line is going to go up the middle of the wider section, and then it's going to tail off as its own kind of line there. So let me show you. I'm just going to barely make a line at the top there. Okay, so hopefully you've got all your lines in. I mean, you can pause while you go around and do your lines, because I think it's taken me about half an hour to put all those lines in, and I didn't want to add all that time to the video. So I also darkened in these two little areas here, made those a touch darker. This little folded part, I put some lines on there as well. And I don't know if you can see from this distance, but in some areas the lines are closer together, making that area look a bit darker. There's an area there, there's an area there, there's an area up here as well. But this is not the final detail that we're going to be putting on here. I've added some spots as well, and I'm just looking to see. Some of the spots almost go into kind of little lines. I'll put these lines in here as well. Okay, there. And some of the lines are really close together. It almost looks like a solid colour from a distance. Some are thicker. This area here, the lines are thicker. And there is a spot also over the opposite edge here. So I'm just going to make those lines there a little bit thicker. Like that. Down here on these bottom edges, the lines are closer together there, which again makes that look more of a solid purple. But we are in fact going to, as a final finishing touch, we're going to be brave, and we're going to put a glaze over the petals. Now, I don't know how much you know about glazing, but it's not that difficult, but you do need to be brave. Now I'm just going to add some curved lines in here, and I'm doing that because I'm going to glaze over that part as well, and I don't want it to be all kind of solid there. You can darken down this central part of the flower, especially where it goes into the actual bud, as it were. I added a few dotted kind of lines there. And this edge here also is quite they're quite close together on that little kind of fan that curls over there. So just go round and adjust as you wish, adding fatter lines and closer together lines and spots. I haven't added many spots on this side, so we'll add a few more spots in there. I also added some lines on this very, very dark petal that we coloured there, and also on this inside piece. So just have fun with it, just put as many dots as you want in there. Add a few more lines. If you want to add some lines there, you could add some lines there. Okay, now before we come to the final part, we need to let this dry now before we can do the final part, and it does need to be absolutely bone dry. So I'm going to get the hairdryer out and make sure that mine is really, really, really dry. And then we're going to do the final part, which is really easy, really fast, but it will just finish it off completely. And then we're going to be done. So I've really enjoyed it so far. This is the first time I have actually painted a bearded iris. And they come in so many different colours. In fact, I was on Instagram earlier and Billy Shao had put up an Instagram post, and it was just like a little sneak peek of a picture of a flower. If you don't know who Billy Shao is, she's an amazing, amazing botanical artist. She does paint other things, but that's what she's known for. I have a couple of her books. She's great. And she just put this corner of this painting that she's obviously doing at the moment, and it was this section. It was bright red. This flower was bright reds and oranges and yellows. And I put a comment underneath, is that a bearded iris? Because I knew instantly, having been looking at this picture for quite a while now as I was drawing out the artwork and everything, I knew exactly what it was. I don't think she's answered me, but I will have a look later. But yeah, it's a good flower to draw. I've really, really enjoyed it. And they are so different. They come in so many colours. They all have got this wavy kind of petal to them. But they come in so many different colours and varieties and sizes, and the greenery is different. They've always got this kind of straw-looking part on there. But yeah, I just think they're lovely. They're really lovely. Made me want to put some in the garden. It really has. But I'm going to go away for a little while and get this dried. I'm not going to have any more tea or biscuits because it's really quite late now. And I have to leave here at 5 in the morning to get to London. So I'm going to dry it with a hairdryer. I'm going to come back. I'm going to do a final glaze and we're going to call that done. So I'll see you back here in a second. Okay, we're back. We're nice and dry and it is time to get brave. The final touch. And I have mixed up here a really watery wash of a blue. Now, which blue did I use? I believe this is Windsor blue, and it is a very wet wash, so it's like water. Okay, you want this really, really thin. Now, you don't have to do this part if you do not want to. I personally like to do this because I think it just finishes it off nice. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to take it just around the edges of the purple that we've just put on there. So I'm just going to knock off the excess because I want it wet, but I don't want it dripping wet. So I'm knocking off the excess. And then we want to do this fairly quickly because it's called a glaze for a reason, okay? So just literally Going to glaze around the edge like that. That's it. And what that will do is it will just knock that back a tiny bit, and it will put a tiny bit of colour on the edge of these petals. So coming over here, round like that. Okay. Now what you don't want to do is that. You don't want to touch really more than once, because it will create a really harsh line. I'll come back and soften that in a moment. So you want to just be really quick like that. Okay, knock off the excess. Back over to this one. I'm going to come this way. So just going around the edge like that. And we're just simply adding a touch more colour. That's all we're doing. So around there, follow the line of the petal. And finally, this central one. Adding a little bit more colour to the curled edges there. I'm going to come and rinse my brush out. I'm going to take off all the excess water, and where I've got those harsh edges, I'm just going to soften those like that. Anywhere you think might be a bit too harsh, just soften. There's a little bit there that's a little bit harsh. Soften that in. I think I'm going to call that done. And there we have it. Our lovely bearded iris. I think it's fab. I'm glad I put the wash of the burnt sienna on there first, because it's just given it that little tint of colour. And I hope you can see what the glazing has done. It's quite difficult to see it actually, but it really does make a difference. I love glazing. So there we go. That's February's flower finished. The bearded iris. And I think it's just gorgeous. And it's time to prepare for March's flower. And I can't actually remember what that is. I will post up, keep an eye on the community wall. If there's a few, I will put a poll up and see which is the favourite. But for now, we are done. Thank you all for watching. I really hope some of you have a go at this. It's really nice to have a floral picture. This would look fab on a Mother's Day card or something like that, wouldn't it? Yeah, I might do that. I might put it on a card. But for now, I am finished. I now have to go and get myself sorted out to get ready to leave at 5 in the morning to get to London. So I will see you all in the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye.